One of the big questions you might encounter is whether you should actually submit your SAT or ACT scores to colleges when many of those colleges are test optional. Hey, it's Anna from Caruso Prep. I'm so happy that you're here. Make sure you subscribe to my channel, as every single week I'm going to be dropping new videos to help you ace your SAT or ACT. I hope you'll join us. One of the first distinctions you want to make is finding out whether or not the college you're applying to is test optional or test blind. Test optional means you don't have to submit your scores to the college in order to be considered for admission. Test blind means even if you do send them, they definitely will not be considered. When it comes to these test optional scores, what are the factors that you should consider? The first factor you should consider is the fact that many of these schools say they're test optional, but the vast majority of the students they admit actually do submit scores. Duke University, for example, says that they're test optional, but far more than 50% of the students that they admit did submit test scores. Another factor you should consider is the 50th percentile rule. This means that if your SAT or ACT score is above the 50th percentile for that college, then you should definitely go ahead and submit, because it's going to put you in the top half of that pool of applicants. However, because many fewer students are submitting scores nowadays and many are choosing to go the test optional route, this 50th percentile is often artificially inflated and is much higher than it used to be for almost all colleges. Since this is the case, I recommend submitting scores that you're proud of, even if it's slightly below the 50th percentile. For example, the 50th percentile for many competitive schools, especially Ivy Leagues, is now virtually a perfect score because only people with virtually perfect scores are submitting. I really think if you earn, say, a 1520 or a 1510 on the SAT, that you should be proud of this score, and I recommend submitting it even if it's not above the 50th percentile for the school that you're considering. Another factor to consider is if the program that you're applying to requires a certain score on the SAT or the ACT. Some schools, like nursing schools, do require certain math or reading scores on different sections of these standardized tests, even if the college themselves do not require you to submit a test score. It even may be required by some community college programs for specialized majors. And finally, another reason to submit your score is if it really showcases skills that you've developed that are relevant to your major field of study. For example, if your reading section score on the SAT wasn't so great, but you had an excellent math score and you're planning to study engineering, I do recommend still submitting your SAT score, because it's going to showcase the strengths that you have in math, even though your overall composite score might be below the 50th percentile or might not be as high as you'd like it to be otherwise for submission. Many students ask if they're gonna choose to submit their scores, do they have to submit all the scores they ever acquired? This varies by the college. Some colleges will require you to sign a statement that if you're choosing to submit your scores, that you've submitted all of them. This, of course, is a matter of integrity between you and the school. I think it's a little bit silly that they demand to have all of them if you're submitting any of them, but this is something that some colleges will request. Generally, though, you could choose to just submit your SAT scores or just submit your ACT scores. You do have to authorize those scores to be released to the school. One other common misconception about submitting scores surrounds the concept of super scoring. So super scoring is when the college is going to look at your highest section score from an individual section of the test across different test dates. So let's say your math score was higher on the March test, but your reading score was higher on the June test. If the college super scores, then they're gonna look at the highest of each section to make a new score for you. Now, some colleges engage in this practice called super scoring and some do not. You have to look at the college website to find out. Colleges almost never consider super scoring for the purpose of awarding merit scholarships, because it would cause them to have to give out too much money. So generally, they may use super scoring for admissions purposes. They're probably not gonna use it for scholarship purposes. And finally, the ACT has kind of generated a lot of buzz about super scoring. ACT will write what your super score is at the top of your score report. However, they will still report your individual composite scores from different test dates. So just because the ACT tells colleges what your super score is, it doesn't mean that your colleges have to consider that or have to use your super score. It doesn't mean they hide your previous scores. The ACT just informs the colleges of what your super score would be so that the colleges don't have to put it together and figure it out themselves. So there is no automatic advantage that the ACT is applied by reporting what your super score is. It just makes it a little bit easier on colleges to make this determination. This one's a little controversial, but let's talk about it anyway. If you know for sure that the college you're interested in applying to considers superscoring, you can actually just focus on one individual section of the test on each test date. I don't think it looks great to have super low scores in other areas, but if the college has made a commitment to considering your super score, you technically can do this, especially if you've already gotten a perfect score on one section of the ACT, as many of my students have. Then on subsequent retakes, you can disregard that section and really focus on the sections of the test that you still have room for improvement on. In addition to deciding whether or not to submit your SAT or ACT scores, there's a lot to consider when you're applying to colleges and preparing for these tests. Head over to carusoprep.com where you can subscribe to my email newsletter and receive a free grammar guide. You can also follow me across multiple social media platforms, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. I'm Caruso Prep everywhere. My name's Anna, and I'm so glad that you're here.